So I'd like to welcome onto the stage a great survivor and former underdog himself, Robbie Bach, the former Chief Xbox Officer. Thank you. All right, Robbie. So you are here. I guess you served as the Chief Xbox Officer for a decade. You were there at the beginning and went through 2.5 generations of console launches.
No, really just two.
Yeah, two.
Yeah, I really wasn't around for much of Xbox One.
All right. And you started as this ultimate underdog inside Microsoft, the biggest of companies, with a brand new hardware business. Xbox has been this unqualified success over 15 years. And Robbie recently wrote a book, Xbox Revisited, looking back a decade plus on the original Xbox launch and some other things. You were very honest about the hardships you had, including when you wrote a full-length resignation letter after the very first E3.
Yeah, well, I did more than, after that E3, I did more than write it. I submitted it. Mm-hmm. For those of you who remember the E3 of 2001, that was not our best moment moment ever. Mm-hmm. Highlighted by a pirate ship running ashore on the rocks. That was sort of the metaphor for the entire event for us.
That was when you pushed the Xbox and it didn't turn on.
It didn't turn on, yeah.
Yes.
That's a second metaphor.
Yes.
The bad thing is, I'm a Microsoft guy. You would have thought I got a blue screen or something. I didn't get anything. I just got this black TV screen. That was bad. That was a tough period.
But you've got all this perspective now. I want to hear about that.
Sure.
The first 4 years led to losses of $5 billion to $7 billion. And then the Xbox 360 generation came.
The amazing thing is they didn't fire me after that, right? I mean, $5-7 billion, most guys would get shot.
They seem to have had a long-term view.
I guess.
Right?
I guess.
Yeah. So the Xbox 360 comes along, and then it lasts for a decade. And now we have Xbox One, and Microsoft is in second place.
Yeah.
Not bad, but what is your sort of summary of this? Like, what's your long view?
Well, I think in some ways it's the way many things work. The beginning is really painful. It was really hard. We were both an underdog and not very good at what we were doing, and didn't really know what we were supposed to be doing. We had a lot of really smart individuals, a lot of people who has sort of an all-star team of talent, but actually not a team. And that first version of Xbox, we were lucky to get the product done. Mm-hmm. I've been involved with some startups since, just advising. And being a startup is tough, and it doesn't matter whether you're inside Microsoft or doing it on your own. That startup phase is crazy, and it's really difficult, and you have to figure out a way to persevere. Mm-hmm. And that team got past that first launch, got into the selling of the product, and then started working on Xbox 360 and really became a team through that process. And that was the thing that I think really changed things, is when we went from being really smart individuals to being a really well-working team.
Mm-hmm. Survival was the first task.
Oh yeah, that first period really was just about survival. I mean, we fought every day. I sort of felt like I was coming in, and it was not what strategy we're on and what are we doing and what are the big pieces we're moving around. It's what's the fire that's burning brightest on my desk today. I'm going to get a fire extinguisher and put it out and know that when I come back tomorrow, it's going to be burning again, and I'm going to have to put it out again. And, we did that for 18 months. And, truth be told, October 1st, I didn't know whether we were going to have consoles on shelves on November 15th. So that tells you how hard the team had to fight, what we had to do to get things done, and how close to shave it was in terms of actually getting to the level of success we did, which was good market share, but horrible financials.
Mm-hmm. So the Xbox 360 turned out better. Right?
Yeah, and here's the thing. When you're going through these challenges, when you are David in your David and Goliath analogy, when you are David, the big thing is to learn, because you're going to get pummeled a bit, right? I mean, Goliath's got a big slingshot and a lot of stones, and you're going to get hit. And so you have to figure out how to learn. And the one thing that team did incredibly well is we learned. We found out things that we did that were wrong. We made mistakes. We fixed them. We figured out what we could do better. We started to understand the industry better and the dynamics of the industry. And all of that learning, some of it was applied in Xbox itself, in the original Xbox, but a whole bunch of it got applied to Xbox 360. And so in many ways, Xbox 360 couldn't have happened without Xbox because we wouldn't have learned the lessons we did. And by the time we got pretty far into the Xbox 360 process, it's not that we were confident. We still felt like we were the underdogs, but we no longer felt like we were getting hit by stones every day. We sort of felt like we'd figured out enough to be able to
It was actually a
to
big
move forward.
mace, I think, right?
Yeah, maybe it was a mace. I don't know. Yeah, maybe David had the stones and Goliath had the mace. My biblical history's not as good as it probably should be.
Well, then you got the Red Rings of Death.
Yeah, and no, it's totally right. It's not uncomfortable at all. I wrote about it extensively in the book. Look, the Red Rings of Death just proves my point. We had something happen to us with a really good product that was performing incredibly well in the marketplace. We started getting customer complaints. And unfortunately, they were the nature, if you worked on the Xbox team and it came back with 3 red lights, that was what they called a general error message, which basically was the Xbox 360's way of saying, I'm never going to work again, thank you very much. And that's all it told us. So we had no idea what was wrong. We didn't know if it was bad parts, a bad manufacturing run, a bad lot, some fault in design, some other problem. And
All that error code stuff just sort of meant nothing, I guess.
well, the error code stuff, but the error codes we got, again, this is general hardware failure. So the error code actually didn't tell us very much. So now you start doing diagnostics. We hired physicists. We had people coming in from universities. We got people from the chipset manufacturers. We really worked hard to figure it out. And I learned 2 incredibly important lessons from that exercise. The first thing is, no matter what happens, you take care of your customers. It doesn't matter, no matter what goes wrong, you figure out a way to take care of your customers. And when we made the decision to write off $1 billion, it's the largest write-off in Microsoft's history at that point. Sadly, they've surpassed that since, but it was the largest write-off in Microsoft's history up until that point. And when we made that decision and said, we're going to make good on these consoles, and we're going to make them work, send it back to us, we'll fix it, customers' response was some frustration for sure, but they just wanted their Xbox 360 back. And they wanted to keep playing it. And our customer satisfaction numbers never went down during that period. And sales, honestly didn't slow down during that period. So that's the first thing I learned. The second thing I learned is that when you're in these kind of businesses, you got to be super persistent and you got to persevere. And the team that dealt with that problem was totally about perseverance. They went after it really hard. The hardware team went after figuring it out. The operations team basically in a week created an entire new supply chain to send you a carton overnight, to have you overnight it back to us, to have us fix it, take your old hard drive out of the old Xbox that was no longer working, put it in the new one, put it back in an overnight carton and ship it to you.
I did that twice.
Yeah, and do it more than once for a number of customers. And the team put that together in about a week. And they just weren't going to let problems beat us. And if you're in an underdog position, that's just the attitude you have to have. Nothing's going to get us down. We've got a good product. We have customers who like it. Let's go after it. And
Why didn't that kill you guys?
well, like I say, I think it was a combination of 2 things. One, we took care of our customers. We said, we'll fix it. And if you have to send it back twice, we'll fix it twice. If you have to send it back 3 times, we had people return it 4 times. You have to send it back, we'll fix it. And that's the first thing. And the second thing is, people really did like the product. If that had happened on the original Xbox, we would have been dead. Because the original Xbox, nobody loved the console. They liked Halo. They liked Xbox Live. But the console was sort of this big black thing that looked like a heater radiator and had the world's largest game controller. It wasn't something people were in love with. They liked a few of the games and they liked Xbox Live. Xbox 360, people genuinely liked the product. And if you have a product that people like and you treat your customers well, they'll give you some grace. They'll give you some forgiveness and they'll say, okay, you're trying to get it right. These things happen. Make it right and we'll move forward. And that's in fact what happened.
So now we have this new generation of platforms launching. Do you sort of have some lessons for the VR folks or the AR folks here?
Well,
Microsoft's got a
Microsoft has a play in
Hololens,
that too.
right?
Yeah, it's HoloLens. I'd say a couple of things. All of these things are about, this is going to sound obvious, but everybody forgets it. None of it's about the technology, it's all about the experience. So if the experience is spend a lot of money, look goofy, have 15 cool moments, and then not have anything after that, it's going to be a cool hot fad and things won't go anywhere. If the experience is we figure out how to get the price to a point where it's palatable to a broad base of people, where there's content, not just in the gaming space, but outside the gaming space as well, that people say, oh, I really value that, either because I have fun or it's an experience that lasts. It's not just cool for the first 10 minutes, it's cool for the first 10 months and beyond. If you can get that experience right, it can be a huge thing in gaming. But I think it's entirely unclear today whether people are going to get the experience right. And that's not a knock on anybody. It's just we're at a stage where things are unclear. Mm-hmm. The hardware is too expensive. It looks a little goofy. You got to have a couple of different machines. The average person understand the things they have to do have a really good VR, AR experience. It's just not simple enough, and the experience isn't straightforward enough. Hardcore gamers will get it. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But if you want to get beyond that audience, the experience has to improve dramatically. And so I think it's a platform that's going to come. I don't think it's going to happen this year or next year. I think it's 2-3 years out. Mm-hmm. But I think when we get there, there's real meat there. There's real opportunity there.
Mm-hmm. How far do you think some of these big companies should reach on platforms like, you could be in PC games, you could be in consoles, you could be on portables, you could be on smartphones and tablets. You got VR and AR. Maybe Activision Blizzard, Tencent might be big enough to do these things. What would you suggest to these?
Well, I think in the book I write a lot about this thing I call purpose, mm-hmm. which is understanding what your North Star is for what you're trying to create. And I think every company who's in the industry has to decide really what is the purpose you're trying to achieve. Where are you? What are you trying to accomplish? If you're somebody at EA or Activision, at some level your purpose is to take the brands you have and drive them everywhere. And to figure out how to take the value you have in brands and intellectual property and make it visible in lots of different places. So you want to be in esports, you want to be in mobile, you want to be in VR, you want to be in a lot of different places because your value add is the IP itself. But for a lot of other players, they have a specific skill set. Maybe it's about social, maybe it's about mobile, whatever it's about. And the cool thing is you don't have to be in every platform because each one of these platforms by themselves is actually now a big business. Mm-hmm. Mobile's big business, console's big business, PC's a big business. I think AR, VR is going to become a big business. There's going to be a lot of places to make money. And the thing you just can't do is you can't spread yourself thin. Mm-hmm. You can't get confused, AR is the hot thing or VR is the hot thing, I got to go do that. If you're really good at mobile games, drive mobile games because there's going to be a lot of business there. If you're really good at console games and you think that's where you are, drive your business there. If you're a startup and you want to do something new, AR, VR is a perfectly great place to go explore. It's certainly one area where there's real opportunity.
Mm-hmm. So you don't really have a dog in the fight in the game wars anymore.
No.
What's your outsider's perspective now on some of this?
Well, yeah, it's funny. I've been gone from Microsoft long enough not to say we anymore. It took me about 2.5 years to stop saying we and I when referring to Microsoft. And I've been away now long enough to not do that. And I look at what's going on, and the thing that I think is so incredibly exciting is that it's no longer just console space. Mm-hmm. There's no single point of failure. There's, people 3 years ago worried, the console business is dying. Well, A, that turned out to be wrong. And B, even if it had, the game business would have been fine. Would have been different. Some people would have suffered, some people would have benefited, but there still would have been a games business, and it would have been a great business. And so to me, the exciting thing looking from the outside is how little I know about so much of the business. I mean, I know the console business really well, and I got to know it incredibly well. And yet, I don't, I follow the mobile business, but I don't completely understand it. I follow the PC gaming business, but I'm not an expert on it. And that to me is cool. It says that there's, a lot of things that can happen. So, to me, looking from the outside, the industry's probably never been healthier. And I'm sure there's pockets of it that aren't. There's companies that aren't. And the winners and losers is changing every year. You point out Microsoft, winner second generation. Actually not losing this generation, but not winning, right? They're in second place, doing fine, but in second place. That's always going to be the case. But the industry itself, I think, is probably as healthy as it's ever been, probably more healthy than it's ever been.
So the second half of your book is where you do have a dog in the fight, I guess, right?
Yeah.
This is civic engineering. You want to tell us about that a little?
Yeah, the book is takes the Xbox story really from start to finish and talks about a strategy framework we developed to create Xbox 360, which I now call the 3P framework. And that basically says that if you're going to have a strategy in 3 pages, you have to write purpose, 5 principles, 5 priorities. Nothing complicated. I can do it in 3 PowerPoint slides for any business. And if I can't, the business doesn't really understand what it's trying to accomplish. And so I take that and explain that through the story of Xbox and the lens of Xbox and Xbox 360. But civic engineering is applying those same principles to what's going on in our communities and what's going on in our civic organizations. And, as healthy as I said the games industry is and will be for the coming years, our communities are incredibly unhealthy right now. It's actually quite sad. And if you watch what's going on in the political race, forget who your candidate is. The underlying theme that I see is a lot of angry and disenfranchised people. And that's a crisis in our country. And when you tell me that every year 25% of kids in high schools are not going to graduate, you now have 25% more who are disenfranchised and unhappy. And that creates an environment that just in the longer term is untenable. And so the book is about thinking through how you would take that 3P framework and apply it to questions like education, apply it to questions like immigration, to pick a controversial topic, to questions like budget and taxes, and things that change communities. In Seattle, how do we fix the transportation system, which if you live in Seattle is now you either ride a bike or you sit in line. All of those types of things that are core civic issues need to be addressed. And the reason I'm so passionate about it is because I don't think it's government's job to fix it. They're a player in it, but everybody in this room has an important role, either through the work you do with nonprofits and civic organizations yourself, or through the work your business does in the community in which you work. And if you don't think that's important, if you don't think being engaged civically as a company in your community is important, I will posit that you're missing the boat, and that will come back to bite you at some point. And that's sort of the premise for the book, and it's what I spend a lot of time talking about and consulting with when I travel around the country.
I guess as Donald Trump hasn't read it.
No, probably not. And I'm not a Trump fan at all. In fact, I just wrote a blog that I posted this week that was sort of about that. But the thing that the Trump phenomenon points out, and the Bernie phenomenon points out, is the fact that people are unhappy. And they're dissatisfied enough and disenfranchised enough that they'll listen to whoever shouts the loudest and says, I'll help you, even if they don't have any plan to help you. And that's our job as what I call the silent majority. That's our job to fix. And we can blame Washington all we want. There are communities, and we absolutely have to fix them. So sorry if that wasn't exactly what you came to hear at GamesBeat, but it is what I think is important, and I think it's important to you in the businesses that you run and the communities that you live in to think about how you're re-engaging. Particular for this audience, think about education and what you're doing. You talked earlier about diversity. Think about that in the context of education and what we can do to change the path of our communities if we got engaged on that front.
So do we have any questions? We've got about a minute, maybe one question, short question. Anybody got a question?
I'm glad he passed the microphone not to Perrin. She'll ask me some really hard question. Hi.
Robbie, thanks for your time today. If you could do one thing differently, what would that be?
It's a really good question. In the context of Xbox, if I could do one thing differently, it would have been to focus on team and culture much sooner than I did. We had real strategy problems, real business problems, real technology issues, all that kind of stuff. If we'd had a team with a consistent culture, we would have fixed those much sooner. And it's easy to get caught up in the technical problems. Remember that actually most problems get solved by the team, not by some idea. And if you get the team right, the ideas go away. And it's pretty magical that way. And so I would have focused much, much earlier on that particular thing.
You mean you had a gamers versus the suits problem?
No. No. So I know we're running 20 seconds over just to explain. When we hired the team, we started with 20 people. We ended when we shipped Xbox with a little over 2,000. So we added 2,000 people in 18 months. We hired people from Microsoft Systems Group. If you don't know Microsoft, different culture. We hired people from Office. They hate the systems people. Odd I know, but they hated the systems people. Then we hired people from our hardware group who made mice and keyboards. Right? Then we hired people from the gaming industry who are nominally somewhat crazy. And you throw all of that in, and it is the United Nations. And they were all great people, and I was Kofi Annan, and it ran about as well as the United Nations did. And so what I would have done sooner is stop that musical chairs and said, we're going to get on the same page, we're going to agree on some core principles, we're going to decide how we're going to run the business. And I don't mean that at a business level, I mean that from a technical level, decision-making level, cultural level. And that, I think, would have dramatically changed things for us.
Well, I think we're out of time.
Yeah, unfortunately, but we do encourage you guys to hold on to these questions because we do have lots of networking opportunities where you can walk right up to Robbie Bach and ask him these questions firsthand, and I'm sure he will not mind that at all. Just be sure to offer him a drink first, please. All right, ladies and gentlemen, a real big thank you so much to Robbie Bach.
Thanks.
Big round of applause.
Thank you. Thanks for the question.
All right.